All right, everybody, welcome back to the Agent Investor Podcast. I'm your host, Tom Caffarella. We've got an exciting guest, a successful guest that I'm excited to have joining us today out of Houston, Texas, Chris Bounds. One of the few names that I didn't have to ask ahead of time, how do you pronounce it? Hopefully, it's as easy as it sounds, but how's it going today, Chris?
Good. And don't worry, plenty of people tend to trip up over bounds. I've been called bonds and a few different other ways, but doing well. How are you?
Yeah, easy enough for me. I'm doing well. So like we were kind of talking about before we jumped on, we want to talk about your real estate story, how you became an agent, how you became an investor, and ultimately give our audience some nuggets, some takeaways on how they can take action on adding investing to their real estate agent business. So starting from kind of like day one, like what kind of got you interested in real estate, like period?
Well, my family has invested in real estate. I remember as a kid going to my parents, that they had one rent house, and in between tenants, I'm just a little kid, so I'm helping like haul out trash or whatever the tenants left whenever they moved, or tree trimming and all this other stuff. So I remember doing that as a child, and my grandfather had hundreds of rental properties all across Central Texas. So subliminally, owning rental properties owning real estate was taught to me. But really, it really sunk in whenever I read a book called Rich Dad Poor Dad. It's a starting point for a lot of folks that get going in real estate investing. I read that in college. And then my first initial thought after reading that book is, holy cow, I'm going to be rich. I didn't realize that, from a philosophical standpoint, the book is phenomenal, but there's a whole how-to and components and strategy that the book doesn't go into. And
dude, you're still in my story. Like, I think if you read my bio and then just kind of like copy and paste, I mean, it's like the same thing. Sorry to cut you off. Continue on.
Yeah, no, but that's the journey that a lot of, because that book puts things in such simple terms, and how wealthy people, how the rich view money, and how they pursue business and investing, and how they grow wealth and passive income over time. It's not taught in schools. And so, yeah, I read that book and I'm like, holy cow, I'm going to be rich. But then I learned, like, all right, there's a little bit more to it than this. You actually have to learn strategy. You can't just go out and just knock on doors and expect to buy houses at a discount. So I ended up having to go through that journey and evolution in my business. But ultimately in college, I ended up buying 4 houses my first year before even graduating.
So how old were you when you read Rich Dad Poor Dad?
20 years old, I believe.
Yeah. So I think I tell people the story for myself. I think I was 19, but I might have been 20. It was somewhere between 19 and 20 for me. Same exact thing. I read the book and I'm like, gonna be rich. This is gonna be easy. This is like whatever. And then it's funny because like I read he has so many books that are like, it's almost the same book with a different title. And
Yeah.
I kept reading and reading and reading. And I'm like, okay, I get it. Like I get the mindset shift, but like, how do you actually do this?
You want to hear an embarrassing story that it goes into, I was young and naive, and I basically believed everything that the book said, but not necessarily understanding that there's a whole strategy components part. So talks about financial statements and financial literacy, very important. And I think on his website, he had like a sample financial statement worksheet. So I'm like, okay, cool. I've got to write all my assets down and all my liabilities. And I'm a college kid. I don't know what assets and liabilities are. So I'm over here writing like, all right, what do I own that's of value? A computer.
Yep.
I've got a truck. I've got a desk. And I'm writing these things down. I actually ended up handing this to a banker when I'm talking to bankers for real estate loans as a college kid with no job, with no income. I just didn't know. I truly didn't know. And I could only imagine what that banker did when he took that from me with a very professional face. And then I imagine he went back and joked with all his loan officers and bankers about this kid he has in his office. But
you know what? Maybe. But here's the thing, right? Like if you've been in the industry, right? And you've been in the industry for a while, I've been in the industry for a while. A 19-year-old kid walks up with that. Now you may laugh about it that day, but you're probably thinking in your head, if this kid is doing this at 19, what's he going to be doing at 29 and 39 and 49? Do you
Well, I
know
was
what
clearly far beyond my peers, because having those conversations with my peers, like their eyes would glaze over. They had no idea, because their thought was get past Thursday or Friday's test. Where are we going to go? Where are we going to party? Like, and then you want to talk end goal for them. It's what job am I going to get? Like business, investing, real estate, zero, like less than 0% interest for your typical college kid.
So you said you bought 4 properties as a college student.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty impressive. I don't know that I've had any guests on that have really done. I had one guest on that I can remember that did 1 deal in college. So I think you're kind of the record holder at that age. How did you pull off 4 deals while you were still in school?
So I'm out there trying to figure it out. Like I read this book, I realized it's possible, but how do you actually do it? And I ended up seeing this bandit sign. It said, real estate millionaire seeks mentee or seeks student. I didn't know anything about like real estate gurus or anything like that, but that's basically what he was. He was a real estate educator that was teaching how to buy pre-foreclosures, which this is pre-2008. So foreclosures, pre-foreclosures, that was on the rise. So the time period here is about 2004, 2005. And call him up. He's got this weekend boot camp, $1,500 or so. And I put it on the credit card, and I drive to I was in College Station, went to Texas A&M. The event was in San Antonio, went there, took this class. And basically he was teaching about knocking on doors, like pulling lists for pre-foreclosures, which in Texas, you have a 21-day time period between when it's filed and when the actual auction date is on the first Tuesday of the month. So I'd pull these lists from my college dorm, and I'd map out on there was no Google Maps then, there was no iPhone then. I'd actually buy the physical paper map and draw dots all across the city of San Antonio, because San Antonio was the only county in the nation that was fully online. So I draw these dots on all these properties that I need to go visit, drive to San Antonio on early Saturday morning, knock on doors all day, drive back. And then I would drive back again on Sunday. I didn't have money for a hotel, so I'd literally have to drive to and from College Station in San Antonio, which is about a 3.5-hour drive. And I did this for 3 months straight. Finally got my first person who talked to me, who didn't like slam the door in my face, cuss me out, or just completely ignore me. He actually said it was the very last house. And me and my friend at the time that we were both doing it together knocked on the door, and he walks out. I don't know. I'm not sure what I'm wearing, but probably cargo shorts and tennis shoes. And I look like a college kid. And this older gentleman walks out and said, we tell him, hey, we just came by to see if we can help you out with the house situation. And then he just looks at us. He goes, how can you help me? Mm-hmm. I'm like, holy cow. It was like the Wile E. Coyote when he catches the Roadrunner for the first time. He's like, what do I do now?
Yeah.
Because I was finally at the moment, like, someone was actually willing to engage with me. Yeah. And what we ended up doing is setting up a follow-up meeting with our mentor, to the guy who we took the boot camp from. And that was the actual meeting where we ended up taking down the deal, getting under contract. And we ended up doing what's called a wholesale transaction, where we closed on it and ended up selling it to another investor.
That's amazing. I mean, it just kind of proves like, you're out there hustling, finding a need, and, making it happen. And I think there was a, kind of something that you said, that I want to highlight, which is the mentor part. And I think the mentor part is so critical. So your story, you had and hit success much faster than I did. So I, read the Rich Dad Poor Dad book, whatever it was, 19 or 20. And I didn't do my first deal until I think 24, 25, which, you talk about embarrassing. Like I took so long to implement. And one of the reasons it took me so long is because I didn't have a mentor. And the mentorship part, I think, is so important because number one, they kind of teach you like, okay, like if you're broke, you have no money, how can you get a deal? And obviously door knocking is something that like we all know works. Maybe it's not something you do still today at your level, but like if you're young and hungry and you're ready to do this and you don't have a marketing budget, door knocking does and will always work. The second part is after you had that, Wile E. Coyote moment, like you had somebody to go to. And if you didn't, I would be curious to know what would have happened, whether or not you would have been able to pull that deal off or not, and kind of like how the direction of your business, the trajectory might have changed. And that's probably more a hypothetical question. But I think one thing that's a takeaway for everybody that's looking to become a real estate investor is get a mentor of some kind. So you guys, you did the hotel. So that was more kind of like a flip deal, right? Where you got some quick cash. I'm assuming, right? And you must have done some split with the mentor, right?
Correct. I mean, since he brought all the money to close the deal, I think it was like a 60-40 where he got 60, we got 40, which I'm cool with. Like, great deal for him. Like, basically, I brought him a free deal and he got 60% of it. All he had to do is show up on and close on it. And then great deal for me. I was able to learn in action, watch a guy negotiate the entire deal, watch him do the paperwork, follow him on the close, and see what he did on the back end when we ended up selling it. So it was a great deal for me. And then I think he was pretty excited just because of my age at the time. So I ended up becoming a pretty valuable testimonial for his program.
Yeah, and it's funny because like when I was telling you about like the premise of the show, the whole premise, I was like, we want the audience to walk away knowing that like anybody could do this. And I didn't know that story before you came on, obviously, but legitimately, if a college kid can do a fix and flip deal, I mean, come on, like anybody can do it, right?
Yeah. And so you want to go to the second deal too. That was the only deal that I did with that specific mentor. The second deal I did completely on my own. And it's a funny story because I should have never been able to find this deal. So we were looking for what's called code compliance or code enforcement violations. Usually it's like high grass or dangerous buildings or whatever. So it's flagged by the city, flagged by the county. So we ended up sending out this mailer. The guy lives out of state or out of town. He lives in another town and he's the executor of his friend. There's I guess no living relatives. So he's the executor of this estate. And then there's this like shack house that he's got to get rid of, and living out of town, it's kind of a headache for him. So we ended up negotiating this deal. I don't know, maybe it was like $10,000 or $12,000 for this shack, and ended up finding a buyer before we ever closed on it. So I didn't know what I was doing. I was basically wholesaling. So ended up closing on both of them simultaneously, where I didn't have to bring any money to the table. Now, this part you probably can't do today. I think the rules have changed in a lot of areas, but I was basically able to close on the purchase and then simultaneously close on the sale where I didn't bring any money and I just took a spread. But we weren't supposed to get this deal because the reason why I was flagged on code compliance is there was a shed in the back that was falling. It was like leaning or falling over, and the city had already demolished it. They just never removed the house from the list. But I didn't know that. And all I knew was it was on the list, and therefore we took action. I mean, we reached out to the owner and ended up finding the executor and bought the deal.
So the other thing I want to highlight with both of those deals that you didn't say, but you said within the stories, is you just did 2 deals with no money.
Yeah.
Right. Two. I mean, the first deal there was money needed, but you didn't use your money. And then the second deal, I mean, literally you didn't put up anything, right? Because you double closed on it.
It's all creativity. So we're solving problems. I mean, you don't have to have money, but money is needed in real estate transactions. No doubt about it. If you want to talk about actual hard costs, I was sending out mailers and I had gas, and I definitely had a lot of time invested, but it didn't necessarily take me bringing 20, 50, 70, $100,000 to actually close on these particular transactions. Depending on what you're doing, though, you might. It's just for what I was doing, I didn't need that.
In the first one, though, like you didn't even have hard costs of marketing, right? Because you were door knocking, which, I mean, again, money, time is money, but like you were door knocking plus you had somebody else put up the cash. So you put nothing into that one, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And as a college kid, like I'm broke. I don't have a job, full-time student, and outside of a small allowance to pay for food and all that, I really don't have any money. So being able to create whatever it was, $17,000, $20,000 within a couple of months, like that was amazing. And that feeling being able to put that in the bank account was absolutely incredible. And that's where I started realizing, hey, if I could do this at scale, like I'm doing this as a college kid with only a few hours a week. If I could do this at scale, what would that look like? So
yeah,
I was pretty excited.
And that's what I'm saying. Like, if I'm your banker and you came to me with that bank statement at 19, I'm like, where's this kid going? Because, unless you just totally, give up on it, it's like, doing your first few deals. So fast forward a little bit. I know, time has passed. Like, what are you kind of like doing now? Like, what have you been up to? Like, how did that kind of transform from doing a couple of like wholesale deals to like where you're at today?
Yeah, so me and my business partner, she ended up moving away to a different city after graduation. I moved to Houston, got a high-paying sales job. This is where a good life gets in the way of a great life. So
Yep.
I don't have any debt. I get a really high-paying sales job right out of college. So I was making like $80,000, $90,000 a year with no debt. Plus, I have a roommate, so my living expenses is half. So I'm actually doing really well. I still have 2 rental properties from the first 4 deals that I did while in college. So I have that. But as far as real estate, I actually didn't do anything extra until 2011 when I got married. Now I'm starting to think about the future and like college funds and retirement and all this other stuff. So I ended up going to my wife and telling her within weeks of getting married, I told her, I was like, hey, babe, I want to start flipping houses again. And she tells the story a lot better than I do because basically I dropped this bomb on her lap and she grew up more traditional, like you just work until you retire. But she went along with it. And we ended up doing the same thing I did in college, knocking on doors for pre-foreclosures. Bought a deal first month, ended up being one of our top grossing deals ever. Very significant deal because it's ultimately what allowed me to go full-time in real estate, but ended up knocking on this door of this pre-foreclosure. It was the one and only deal that she actually went on the inspection with me. Smelled horrendous. I mean, you know what the deals are. I smelled money. She smelled all the other things in the house. So she politely excused herself while I took that deal down. We ended up renting it out for a few years and then sold it for it was over $100,000 gross profit. But fast forward that, so I ended up getting licensed in 2014. Still had a job, but in 2015, that deal we sold for $100,000. Another deal that we had bought shortly after that deal that Jamie and I bought together sold for about $120,000 gross profit. And then we had another deal that we had bought earlier that we had sold for, it was probably closer to a $50,000 profit. So it was these 3 consecutive deals, like bam, bam, bam. And then my employer cut my salary in half. Mm-hmm. So it's like, okay, we've got this whole real estate thing going and the proof of concept is there. We've got the groundwork and foundation there. We're to the point where we could probably start scaling. And then on top of that, we got some pretty good paydays. Mm-hmm. And then my employer, which I was already kind of getting bored and disinterested with it, they cut my pay in half. So that was 2015, decided to go full time. So I ended up quitting my job. It was nothing. There's no grand ceremony in the actual quitting process or going to HR and doing that. So it was nothing YouTube worthy. But all in all, we went full scale and flipping because now I needed income. We were buying rental properties. We did a couple flips, but now we needed income. So we started flipping. That's how we're paying bills. And since then, we flipped 200 or so houses. But today, our main focus is buying rental properties. Yep. Building wealth and passive income. Because ultimately, flipping houses, wholesaling houses, it's a great way to make money. And you can make a lot of money doing it. But it's really no different than the real estate agent doing commissions. Yep. Because once you wholesale a house, once you flip a house, the income's gone. Like,
Yep.
I mean, you get it, but you'll never get any more income from that transaction again.
Yep.
But when you buy a rental, you've got multiple streams of income, whether it's equity gain, appreciation, tax depreciation, and then cash flow through the actual rent. So, and we realized that most of our best deals were from rentals. So we started scaling back on the flipping in 2018 and allowing us to actually hold more rentals. And then now, as of recently, we closed on a 384 unit, or we're general partners in a 384 unit multifamily property in Florida. So that's the main focus now, is more the wealth building passive income game versus the very, very exhausting sometimes active flipping.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so you said a few things that I liked. I mean, I'm gonna misquote you, but basically one of the things that I think is so important for anybody that's like thinking about investing is, trading the good life for the great life. And I think that's, again, specifically for agents that are listening. You can make a bunch of money as a real estate agent. You can make a bunch of money flipping too. But like, you're never, as a real estate agent, maybe you make $100, $200, $300,000 a year, which is a good life. And I'm not going to say that there are not agents that make above that. There are, but that's like the 0.1%. I don't even know, probably smaller than that, like 1 out of like 10,000 probably, that are above earning like $300,000 a year. So you can make a really comfortable life. But your shift in focus in 2018 is something that, like, I think that every agent that's listening to this call should think about, which is that whether you're flipping homes or whether you're a really highly paid agent, once you're done, you're done. And once you do that last deal, whether it's a listing, a buyer side, whatever, there's nothing left. And the passive income stuff is so important, especially for agents, because there is no such thing as like a pension for an agent. There's no retirement account for an agent. And the passive income stuff, it compounds. So the thing about it, and I'm sure this is how you did the math, and we do this all the time. We kind of look at like our wealth building that we've done since we've been in business. I have two partners, and we look at, like, in the 15 years, like, where did our wealth get built? And it's not, we do a ton of flips. We have a big real estate brokerage, and it's in neither of those. It's like 2/3 from the rentals. But the rental stuff, like, it takes time to kind of build up. But as it's building up, you can't compete with it because it's working even when you're not working. Yep. And I'm sure that's what you looked at when you made that conscious decision, like, hey, I'm going to flip a little bit less, and I'm gonna do some syndications, do some other type of deals. And 384 units, I mean, I don't know what percentage you are of that, but that's a huge deal to kind of be a part of. So congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. And ultimately, where I started getting this idea was, as far as switching from active flips to rentals, is, I mean, it's a lot more competitive today. So there's that. But also, if we would have kept just half, even less than half of all the rentals, and not flipped them. So if we would have not scaled.
Do not go there with me right now. Don't even do it right now.
Yeah, you know what that number is. And for us, like, from an equity standpoint, I'd never have to work again. Now, that's not true on an active income, because truth be told, rental properties aren't passive. I mean, you do get some cash flow. I mean, you're not going to be able to retire off that unless you've got 50 plus until they're paid off. But from an equity standpoint, like, we'd be set.
Yep.
So that's why, and that's also why we're going into the multifamily. It's just easier to scale at this point. Like, instead of buying a whole bunch of single families, I'll just buy one multifamily, and I'll partner with some other people and be able to scale faster. But you said it before recently, where the real estate agent, there is no retirement option. It's actually worse from a retirement standpoint than most Fortune 500 positions. Yep. Because at least with them, you can get a 401k. There's certain stock incentives. And then there are some real estate companies that have stock incentives now. It's kind of a newer thing. But as far as the typical real estate agent at most real estate brokerages, there is no retirement. They actually must make enough money to, and then have the discipline to take the net of that money, take a portion of it and go out and invest it somewhere else, whether it's stocks, mutual funds, bonds, notes,
And that's so hard to do. That's so hard to do. And like, I'm an investor. I think about this stuff all the time, but like, I know even for myself, like as I make more active income, it's so easy to be like, oh, like I could get a bigger house, a bigger car.
Yeah. Well, because you've worked so hard for that active income, you feel like you deserve it.
Yep.
And you do, but having that discipline to have delayed gratification and say, hey, look, I'm not going to go out and buy the Range Rover. I'm actually going to put it towards a rental property.
Yep.
And I'm going to suck it up for another couple of years. And then I'm going to do it again. And I'm going to do it again. And I'm going to do it again. I mean, that's ultimately how folks, I mean, you want to take like foreigners and when they come over, they keep that very minimalistic mindset and they work their butts off. They don't spend anything. 30 years go by. They've got multi-million dollars of assets and businesses and all this. And you're like, what?
Yeah.
I mean, just because you don't look like you're rich, driving the nice car, wearing the fancy clothes, going on the lavish vacations, having the $500,000 plus $1,000 house. It doesn't necessarily mean you're not wealthy. Another good book to recommend is The Millionaire Next Door. It's a great case study and shows you exactly what the average millionaire in America looks like. And it's not the person in the nice house and the nice car. It's actually the blue collar worker that buys used cars and doesn't go on lavish vacations. And they typically have investments in real estate and own their own business.
Yeah. There almost hasn't been a guest that I've had on, in the past few years that hasn't said something related to living below your means, in some capacity, in some way. And I think that, it's kind of an understated, I mean, it's a very simplistic thing, but it's kind of understated, like in growing like any sort of business or wealth in general, is like, if you're always spending what you're making, it's hard to kind of grow.
Yeah.
So again, it's just such a simple thing.
And you could redefine living below your means, at least for me, and maybe this isn't for everyone, but my initial thought there is you just don't spend any money and you live like a very unsatisfying life because you're just not spending anything. You're not going on vacations, but it doesn't necessarily mean that. All it means is spending less than you're making.
Right.
So
exactly.
you can live below your means, but just going out making more money. Like if you got $100,000 income right now, you can cut expenses, but there's only so much you can really cut. But there's unlimited amount of money you can make.
Yeah.
So now you can do both. You just got to figure out what's the easiest path. I mean, for me, I've always figured like it's a lot more easier to make more money. I love expenses. Don't buy stupid stuff.
I love that you said that because like, as you're saying that, I'm like, that's kind of like what I did. Like I don't spend lavishly, but at the same time, like I'm not living super frugally. And I've always looked at it like, well, if I have to put in an extra 10 hours a week to be, income above expenses, then that's what I'm going to do. And that's what I chose to do. You could go the other way too. You could just say, hey, like, I'm not going to make more money, but I'm going to cut my expenses. So it's not just as simple, like you're saying, is like, okay, I'm going to cut my expenses and live off of nothing. It can also be like, hey, I'm going to work an extra 10, 15 hours a week and make more money, or form a business or do something to be more effective. And, instead of making 100, I make 140, whatever that is.
Absolutely. And then when you get those wins, you don't have to buy the Range Rover, but treat yourself. Like go out to a nice dinner. On that $100,000 rental that we ended up selling, that helped me go full time. We bought it's like a coffee machine. It's like a mini Starbucks in our house. It's a $1,500 coffee machine. We still have it today. I was never really a coffee drinker before getting this. Love it. But that was how we treated ourselves, as opposed to going out and buying the new car or upgrading our lifestyle that much. And on the second deal where we made like 120 grand, we just went out to a really nice dinner. Dropped way more money than we normally would on dinner. It was a good date night, but everything else just went back into the business.
So let me ask you this for agents that are kind of on here now that like either haven't done their first deal yet or have done just like a couple of deals, like, seeing that you're doing 300 plus units right now, like what advice would you give to them to just get going and get started?
Yeah, I've pulled this many times. The reason why people do not invest is because they either think they don't have enough money, so financing, or they just don't know how, the education. And really, it's all financing is the education too. It's just knowing how to finance the deals. So you've just got to get educated. It's so easy to do that now because of the internet. So that wasn't necessarily around when the internet was around, but YouTube didn't exist at the time, or it definitely isn't what it is now. So you can learn anything you want on YouTube. Now, it is going to take time. So watching your show, watching my show, and the hundreds of other shows, it will take time to piece the information together. Or you go to a boot camp, you go to a mentorship program. Be careful before spending your money. I mean, get reviews and testimonials, but ultimately getting educated is the easy part. You do have to decide to do it though. The financing is easy. There are hard money companies everywhere that will fund near and up to 100% of a deal that makes sense. So the financing is the easy part. Once you actually get educated, then you can get private lenders. I mean, we've used well over $18 million in private lender funds, folks just like you that have money in a retirement account or whatever, and they just want to earn a good rate. So they're happy to fund us on our deals. And then networking with other folks. Real estate agents are the center of their community. So they have a wealth of information and resources that they can provide investors in exchange for education. So just be a part of your network, grow that network, start talking with other investors and figure out how you can add value to them, to their business or whatever it is that they need. And in exchange, you could potentially walk through a deal with them and see how that deal transpires. How did they get the deal? How did they negotiate it? Did they send a mailer? Was it a Google ad, or how did they finance it? How are they rehabbing it? How are they finding the contractors? It's just networking.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, so when I used to do a bunch of like seminars myself locally, and one of the lines I said every single time was, the more you learn, the more you earn. And it's 100% true. And I agree with you. I think the first step is getting educated. I would highly advocate, for anybody that can afford it, to join a coaching program if you can. There's a lot of great ones, like Chris mentioned. There's some that aren't so great, but like there are tons of great ones. And I think that's like that like you said, like I think that's the formula, like especially in the beginning. And then of course, like you've got to then take action. But I think
and if you're young in your career, you could work for an investor. Like that's something else that I wish I did early on. I could have gone and worked with investors that are doing what, it doesn't have to be an investor. Maybe it's a hard money company. Maybe it's an insurance company that focuses on real estate investments or multifamily. So find that niche that you're looking for and go work with them. Get your real estate license. I assume that it's probably most of your audience right now, so you may already have that. Now, if you're already have an established business where you're doing 5, 10, $20 million a year, maybe that part might not make sense, but you can go back to the other thing where, like you were saying, either join a mentorship program, get a coach, get a mentor, or if you want to do it a little bit on the light side as far as cost, just go to a couple boot camps. I'm going to one in October for multifamily. It's one of the first multifamily boot camps that I've ever paid for. $200. And I know guys who are in that program that are actually doing deals that are far less experienced than I am in the overall real estate timeline. So I'm like, $200. That's nothing.
Oh yeah.
Weekend boot camp.
Yeah. And it's funny because like I talk to people and they say, oh wow, like this mentorship, whatever, it's a lot of money. And I look at it like, in real estate investing, there's millions to be made. We're not talking about making like a few $100s. So even the higher price tag ones, I mean, you don't have to be in a higher price tag one to succeed, but like even the higher price tag ones, if you're applying, you're going to get like, I mean, 10 times ROI is probably too low. Like you're going to get, whatever it is, 50, 100 times like what you spent. But even the lower, the prices of them obviously don't necessarily reflect the value, but like I would do something if you could and get around other people. So Chris, you mentioned, now, did you say you had a podcast as well?
Yeah, invested agent. So we've had a local community. Then COVID happened, so it was a monthly meetup event. We were teaching other real estate investors and agents, and when COVID happened, everything went online. So we did the same thing too. But ultimately, we started rethinking of what it is that we actually really want to do. And it's kind of like what you're doing. As an agent, it's always surprising how little education agents have on investing, yet they all want to invest. Yep. Like most real estate agents want to invest. Most do not. Well, yep. So we ended up rebranding that event and made an organization called Invested Agents, where we teach agents how to increase their income, build wealth, and create the lifestyle that they deserve through real estate investing. And then we have a real estate team. So folks that want to join our team, they can work right beside us, and happy to teach them anything we can do to help them grow their business and build wealth and build passive income. It helps us, helps them. We want to do anything we can to help them succeed. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
Awesome. Yeah. So, I mean, definitely. So how can they check that stuff out? The invested
Invested Agents, investedagents.com is our hub. There you can get connected to our community. It's a free community. Anyone can join. We have tons of video. We've got basically a video a day dropping on YouTube. We have a blog, and then, but you can get connected with us on, if you go to investedagents.com, it has our social links for Facebook and Instagram. And I'm not quite as up to date on TikTok. I keep trying to, I keep trying to stay consistent on that.
Chris, we're too old. We're too old.
No, hey, the average age on TikTok right now, I think, is 30 to 50. So,
oh, really? Okay.
It's the evolution of everything. Remember, Facebook was for college kids. Now it's like 40 to 60-year-olds on Facebook. So, yeah, everyone, they'll come up with something else. Like the kids always want to find their own party.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, then the old folk find out about it, and then they start something new. So
yeah, the evolution.
Well, I want to thank you. I know you're a busy guy, doing a lot of awesome things. I want to thank you for joining, and we'll be back again next week with another episode, another great guest at the Agent Investor Podcast. Thanks again, Chris, and we'll see everybody next week.